Good morning and welcome back. We are on day 266 of our year-long trek through the Bible. We're looking at the moment at the parables of Jesus. And today we are looking at Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31, the story of Dives and Lazarus. Jesus was speaking to some Pharisees. There was this rich man dressed in purple and fine linen. Every day he feasted lavishly. At his gate in the dirt, a poor man called Lazarus lay, scratching himself. How he longed to eat even the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs would come and lick his sores. Well, when he died, the angels carried him up to be embraced by Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. Suffering in Hades, he looked up, and in the far distance he saw Abraham giving Lazarus a hug. He called out, "Father Abraham, have pity. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool my tongue. I'm in distress in this flame." Abraham replied, "Son, remember that you got all those good things when you were living, and Lazarus got evil. Now he's comfortable here, and you are suffering. Apart from which, between us and you, a great crevasse has been fixed to prevent anyone who wanted to from coming down there, and nobody is allowed to come from there to us." And the formerly rich man said, "Can I then ask this, Father? Send Lazarus to my father's house. I've got 5 brothers who need to be warned in case they too come to this place of suffering." But Abraham said, "They have Moses and the prophets to listen to." "No, Father Abraham," he replied, "but if somebody from among the dead goes to them, they will change for the better." Moses replied, "If they don't pay heed to Moses and the prophets, they won't be convinced even if someone does rise from the dead." Well, this is another parable that's very familiar to us, and we think we can understand it without too much effort. On the face of it, rich people and poor people are going to exchange places in the afterlife, the rich receiving the discomfort and the poor delightful company. But this easy reading rather misses the point, which is more subtle. It is actually a part of Jesus' deep criticism of the religion of the scribes and the Pharisees of his time, and a direct attack on their judgmental attitude towards the poor and their condemnation of those whose faith is not based on obedience. This is one of the first occurrences where the world of the dead is described as unpleasant and fiery, a place where people are unreachable and beyond help or rescue. This image fed into the medieval picture of hell, of course. Here, Jesus is using it as a sharp contrast between the rich man's fate and that of the beggar suffering at his gates. The gospel will, of course, turn the world upside down, and here Jesus is trying to show some Pharisees the effect that this turnaround ought to have on their attitudes. The perfect one, the well-to-do Pharisee in the story, would never have anything to do with the imperfect, unclean specimen at his gates, lest he should be sullied with that man's uncleanness. The perfect one would regard his own perfection as pleasing to God, and would assume that his prosperity and the amount of food on his table were signs of God's favour right here and now on earth. So, this isn't a parable about the fires of hell and the delights of heaven at all. This is a criticism of the judgmental nature of Pharisaical religion, both then and now. Happily worshipping in our churches, there is a big temptation to assume we are going to heaven and the rest of the world is off to hell in a handcart. This parable is against us too, if we think like that. There are plenty of ancient versions of this story, mostly about a wicked rich man and a pious poor man who have their fortunes reversed. If Jesus had such stories in mind, he changed the plot in a startling way. Jesus wants the Pharisees to know that their goodness is too good to be true. And God has greater regard for the poor, the needy, and the outcast than he has for their unbelievable purity. And that goes for us too, if we care to read this parable correctly. For potentially we are that rich man, and our fate too is in the balance. Luke added the final sentence about people not believing even if someone should rise from the dead as a wry reflection on the persistent unbelief of the majority of the Jews of his own day. Well, tomorrow we have the parable of the unjust judge and its message about persistence. I'll see you tomorrow.